I still remember the smell of pine wood and rain the day I arrived at Ethan's house. It was the kind of small-town summer where the air carried a softness, like a promise of something unspoken. Ethan had been my best friend since freshman year, loud, funny, loyal in ways that made everyone around him feel at ease. I hadn't seen him in months, and the idea of spending a few weeks at his family's countryside home felt like the perfect break from the noise of the city. Ethan's family welcomed me like their own. His mother insisted on overfeeding me. His father offered to take me fishing. And then there was him, Liam, Ethan's older brother. I'd heard his name a few times before, always in passing. "He's quiet," Ethan had said once. "Doesn't talk much, works with his hands, kind of a loner." The first time I saw him, he was standing by his truck, arms crossed, the late afternoon light cutting across his face. He looked up when I stepped out of the car. His eyes, a shade of gray I'd never seen before, met mine for just a second. Then he nodded, said, "You're Ethan's friend." I nodded back. That was all. But something about his voice lingered. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and coffee. Ethan gave me the grand tour, talking nonstop as usual. "That's Liam's room. Don't go in there unless you want to get a death stare." He laughed. "He's weird about privacy." I laughed too, pretending I wasn't curious. But I was. That night, after dinner, Liam joined us on the porch. Ethan was telling stories, making everyone laugh. But I couldn't help noticing the quiet figure beside him. The way Liam's fingers tapped the edge of his glass. The faint smile that appeared when Ethan said something ridiculous. When our eyes met, he looked away quickly. I told myself it was nothing. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Breakfast with the family, long drives with Ethan, lazy afternoons by the river. I'd catch glimpses of Liam here and there, fixing the fence, bringing in groceries, working on his motorcycle. Every time our paths crossed, I felt an odd tightness in my chest. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it felt deliberate, like every word carried weight. One evening, it started raining out of nowhere. Ethan and I ran inside, laughing, shoes soaked. Liam was in the kitchen, standing by the counter with a mug of coffee. "You'll catch a cold," he said quietly, handing me a towel. Our fingers brushed. It was such a small thing, a second at most, but it left me frozen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the touch in my head, wondering why it felt different. I wasn't supposed to feel this way, not toward my best friend's brother. I tried to tell myself it was just admiration, maybe confusion. But when I saw Liam again the next morning, shirt sleeves rolled up, fixing a shelf near the window, I knew it was more than that. The silence between us began to change. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was charged, like something waiting to be said but never spoken. He'd glance at me longer than he should. I'd find excuses to be near him, offering help, asking about his tools, anything just to hear his voice. One afternoon, Ethan had to drive to town to pick up supplies. It was just me and Liam in the house. I sat in the living room, pretending to read while he worked nearby. The rain had returned, tapping softly on the windows. Without warning, the power flickered and went out. Liam stood up and sighed. "Generator must have tripped again," he muttered. Ethan called from outside, saying he'd check it. Then it was quiet, just me and him, the room dimly lit by the glow of a single lantern. I tried to say something casual, anything, but the words caught in my throat. Liam looked at me for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Something gentle, almost searching. He walked over slowly, his footsteps soft against the wooden floor. Then he reached for the doorknob, turned it, and the faint click of the lock echoed louder than thunder. I froze. He didn't move closer right away. He just stood there looking at me. "Trust me," he said, his voice low, steady. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't yet name. My heart was racing, not from fear but from everything I'd been trying to hide. Outside, the storm raged louder, but in that quiet room, I could only hear the sound of my own breath, and in that moment, I didn't know if I was more afraid of him, or of what I was feeling. For a moment, time stood still. The only sound was the steady rhythm of rain outside and the faint ticking of a wall clock. Liam didn't say anything more. He just looked at me, not with anger, not with demand, but with a quiet intensity that made my pulse quicken. I wanted to speak, to ask him what he meant, but my voice didn't come out. My throat felt dry, my palms warm. He took a slow breath, running a hand through his hair, then said softly, "I'm not going to do anything you don't want. I just need you to listen." The tone in his voice wasn't forceful. It was fragile, almost trembling beneath its calm surface. He moved closer, just enough that I could see the faint scar near his temple, something I'd never noticed before. "You look at me like you're trying not to," he said, "like you've been holding your breath for weeks." The words hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. I had been holding something back, pretending that my heart wasn't racing every time he entered the room. Pretending that my thoughts weren't wandering to him in quiet moments. "I didn't mean for it to be obvious," I murmured, my voice barely audible. He gave a small, almost sad smile. "It wasn't, not to anyone else." He hesitated, glancing toward the window where the storm continued to pour. I'd been trying to ignore it too. A silence followed, filled only by the sound of rain. Then, without words, he sat down on the edge of the couch beside me. The lantern flickered, throwing soft light across his face. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the closeness that both comforted and terrified me. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. "Maybe not," he replied quietly. "But you are." There was no movement, no grand gesture, only the space between us shrinking, not physically, but emotionally. Every breath seemed louder, heavier. The air carried something raw and unspoken. I turned to him, and for a second, our eyes locked. That look alone said everything. Words couldn't. It wasn't lust or recklessness. It was the ache of two people standing on the edge of something they couldn't define. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine, not to take, but to ask. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. That one touch was enough to unravel all the restraint I had left. "I don't want to ruin anything," I said, my voice shaking. "Ethan trusts me. You're his brother." Liam's gaze didn't waver. "I know. That's why I'm saying this now, before it becomes something we can't undo." He pulled his hand away slowly, like he was afraid even that gesture might be too much. "You don't owe me anything," he continued. "But I need you to know, you're not the only one who feels it." My breath caught. His words filled the room like a confession neither of us had wanted but both had needed. I didn't reply. I couldn't, because admitting it out loud would make it real. The storm outside grew louder, a rush of wind rattling the window frames. Ethan's voice called faintly from the yard, shouting something about the generator, and just like that, the fragile moment broke. We both stood, startled by the reminder of reality. Liam rubbed his face, exhaling hard. "He'll be back in a minute," he said, his tone shifting to something almost ordinary. "We should—" "I know." He nodded once, turned the lock and opened the door again. The sudden draft of cool air felt like a wake-up call. I stepped back, unsure where to look, what to feel. When Ethan walked in, drenched but cheerful, the house felt different, smaller, heavier somehow. He started talking about the storm and how the power might stay out all night. I nodded and laughed where I should, but my mind wasn't there. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My chest felt tight with something I couldn't name, guilt, maybe, or longing. The sound of rain was softer now, almost rhythmic. Through the thin wall I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Liam's room was next to mine. He didn't knock, didn't speak. He just paused for a moment on the other side of the door. I could almost feel his presence through the wood, like an invisible connection neither of us could cut. Then, after a few seconds, he walked away. I turned onto my side, eyes burning with unshed tears. It wasn't what happened that haunted me. It was what almost did. When morning came, sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the room gold. The house was quiet again. At breakfast, Liam sat across from me, his expression calm, unreadable. Ethan chatted between bites, oblivious to the current running under the table. Every time our eyes met, I felt the weight of last night pressing on my chest. We didn't speak a word about it. We didn't need to. The silence between us said more than any confession could. Sometimes, silence screams louder than any words, and that morning, it was deafening. The morning after that storm felt like a dream I wasn't sure I'd had. The air smelled of wet grass, sunlight spilling over the hills like nothing had happened. But inside me, everything had changed. Ethan was humming in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, cheerful as ever. Liam sat at the far end of the table, sipping coffee, silent. Our eyes met once, just long enough to exchange a quiet understanding, the kind that says we both know, but we'll never speak of it. When breakfast was over, I packed my bag. My visit was supposed to last another week, but I told Ethan I had to return early, made up something about work, deadlines, and family. He frowned, surprised, but didn't question it. "You'll visit again soon, right?" he said, slapping my shoulder with his easy grin. I nodded, smiling back even though my chest ached. Liam didn't say goodbye right away. He waited until Ethan went outside to load my bags into the car. Then he stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to run," he said. I looked up at him. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm still living there. "I'm not running," I said softly. "I'm just doing the right thing." He gave a slow nod. "Maybe that's the same thing." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt full, not of tension now, but of all the words that could never be said. He hesitated, then reached out and gently took my wrist. It wasn't a pull, just a pause, a final connection before letting go. "I don't regret meeting you," he murmured. "I don't either," I said. "But I think I'll spend a long time trying not to remember this." He gave a faint, sad smile. "Then remember it kindly." When Ethan returned, the spell broke. Liam stepped back, nodding once before walking toward the workshop, not looking back. Ethan waved, calling out, "Tell your mom I said hi!" And just like that, the car door shut and the house disappeared behind us. The drive back was quiet. The trees blurred past like fragments of memory, green, golden, then gone. Every mile that pulled me farther from that house felt like a relief and a heartbreak at the same time. Back home, the days felt heavier. I threw myself into routine, work, friends, noise, anything to keep from thinking. But late at night, I'd find myself remembering little things. The way Liam spoke softly when he didn't have to. The flicker of the lantern that night. The sound of rain against the glass. It wasn't what happened that haunted me. It was what didn't weeks past. I wrote a letter to him once, though I never sent it. It wasn't a confession, more like a release. "I don't know what to call what we shared," I wrote. Maybe it was wrong. Maybe it was just a reflection of two lonely hearts finding each other in the wrong moment. But you made me see a part of myself I'd been too afraid to face. Thank you, and I'm sorry. I folded it neatly, placed it in a drawer, and never looked at it again. Months later, Ethan called. He sounded happy, telling me he was getting married, that Liam had moved abroad for work. I congratulated him, smiled through the phone, and hung up. For a long time afterward, I just sat there in silence, realizing that life had gone on for everyone except me. That night, I found an old photo of that summer, the three of us standing by the river, laughing, sunlight catching our faces. I stared at it for a long time, tracing the edges of the image with my thumb. It didn't hurt as sharply anymore. It just left a quiet ache, like a scar that had finally healed. Looking back, I realized something important. What happened wasn't really about betrayal or temptation. It was about truth, about finding a mirror when you least expect it. Liam wasn't a mistake. He was a moment. One that showed me who I really was when the world wasn't looking. I learned that infidelity isn't always about actions. Sometimes it's about the thoughts we bury, the emotions we don't admit, the lines we blur in silence. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is walking away before you destroy what's pure in someone else. Years later, I passed through that same town again. The old roads looked smaller, the air somehow quieter. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I'd already left a piece of myself there, and taken a lesson I'd never forget. As the sun dipped behind the hills, I whispered to the open air, "Some stories aren't meant to last. They're meant to change us, and maybe that's what love is. Not possession, not forever, but understanding. Understanding when to hold on and when to let go."